Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out the Vita port of 999. You're just going to see some footage of the conversation playing in the background of it that I've just taken after I've recorded this rant. So, this is basically a remastering of it. They made it along in a bundle with Virtue's Last Reward, the sequel, and put it out on Vita and PS4. A little bit strange they did that on Vita and didn't make it standalone, but whatever. I played the original 999 back on DS when it came out. There was a Destructoid review which made it sound absolutely fantastic, and when I went and played like the weird demo they had online, I actually really enjoyed it. So I thought to myself, let's do this. And I did, so I did. And yeah, I loved it. I have a review of it up on Game FAQs that says 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors, perfect success. So that's a little bit embarrassing, but well, it's good to see that I haven't lost my touch in being cringeworthy over the years. So, the remake the remaster I should say, the remaster with the bundle with the other game, went on sale and I asked for a review code for it and I didn't get it. Not only that, but I think Axis actually took me off their press list because I haven't gotten a press email from them in a while. Kind of disappointing, honestly, but I guess that's just what happens sometimes with this sort of thing. But I didn't end up buying the remaster, mainly because I didn't have the money at the time, and I had already played 999 in VLR, so it's kind of hard trying to play these sorts of games because trying to play these sorts of games twice, I should say, because if you're trying to play them twice, you already know what's going on the second time. So it can be kind of hard to play through, but I got the game on sale for like $5, which was a little bit weird. It really shouldn't be that cheap considering this is 999 in VLR, two of the best things coming out of Japan in a long time, but there you go. I got it. I booted it up just recently because I literally have nothing else to talk about, so I figured I'd just do this to buy myself a little bit of extra time. And I played one route. I played through to the knife ending, which, coincidentally enough, is also the first ending I got when I played the game on the DS. The game's overall structure is pretty much identical, for the most part. Except for one major thing. You don't actually have to play through the entire game 6 times now! Hooray! Because I had to do that back when the DS version came out, and I tell you, man, I had that first puzzle locked down by heart. I knew the solution right away. It was a little bit weird, but there you go. Strangely enough, I didn't remember it this time, but I remembered, like, another puzzle that I ended up running into. It's weird. My brain works in mysterious ways. I can't remember the names of the people I live next to, but asked me to name the sword of a character I played in a game 10 years ago, and I could probably do that. I don't know why. But yeah, as I was saying, they have added the flow system from Virtue's Last Reward, and I suppose Zero Time Dilemma, although not really, you know why if you've played that game, where you can drop back in the plot to any part that you want and then go down a different path if you want to. For those of you who know 999, you know this is a little bit of a weird thing considering how much your choices actually had an effect on the plot in this game. But you can do it anyway, it saves you a little bit of time, and I can appreciate that. That's the major plus to this port of the game, and that pretty much makes it so that you should only play this version, just mainly because it saves you a few hours going back through the same stuff on skip. It's a little bit annoying, I'll tell you that much, but still, it's good to have here. There are some other benefits to the remaster as well. The background graphics are really nice. They've clearly been worked on from the original source material, and they look great. They look a little bit bare sometimes, but, well, that's just kind of what the game originally had to work with. And frankly, I don't mind, because it prevents you from getting confused and thinking there might be an object there you can take. But no, the background graphics are all top-notch as always. They look great. The animations they have of, like, doors opening and stuff also look great. It really is just more or less a higher definition version of 999 from the DS. Thumbs up. Same thing with the soundtrack. It's exactly the same soundtrack and a higher quality. Who the hell is going to complain about that? Because the 999 soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks in video games. It's just that damn good. So yes, that is the background graphics and the soundtrack are great. The character graphics, not so much. Now, for those of you who play on emulators, this might be a familiar topic to you, but they have these weird, like, sprite improvement tools, these graphic improvement tools where you can scale the game up and have them do like a computer-generated sort of algorithm on them to make them look better when they're scaled upwards. This is kind of like a halfway between. The character sprites on the 999's remaster are kind of halfway between an upscale and a redraw. It looks like they've kind of redrawn the sprites exactly the same to the point where it looks like they've just been given a little bit of a, you know, scale ×2 from the original assets. And it looks a little bit weird against the background graphics. Back on the DS, it wasn't that big of a problem because it all looked relatively pixelated and the pixelation of the character sprites in the background worked well with each other. In this game, where the background is nice and high def, and the character sprites look like they came straight from the SNES era, it looks a little bit weird. I think they could have done to have redrawn the sprites in the same style, but given them a bit more detail and made them look a little bit more complex, because they just don't seem to fit as well as they used to back on the DS. Some people might think of this as blasphemy, but that's just what I think. It just looks a little bit weird to me.
Anyway,
with that said, let's talk about the visual novel stuff. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Zero Escape in any shape or form, the idea is that it's a visual novel combined with escape the room puzzles. You go through and you listen to the characters talk and try and figure out their situation. Then they go into an escape room in order to further the plot. The plot being that there is a madman who has kidnapped 9 people, stuck them inside of what appears to be a ship, and you have to try and escape from the viewpoint of one of the main characters. I'm not going to go any further into the plot than that, but I will tell you that the plot is fantastic. It has a lot of twists and turns, properly foreshadowed twists and turns. The characters are mostly fun to deal with, but we'll get to why that might be a problem in this remaster later. And it's a good thriller. It's a really good thriller if you enjoy your, you know, edge to your seat sort of thrills of that sort of thing. I absolutely do recommend it to anyone who wants to play it, but again, you're not here to listen to me endlessly praise it, are you? So, nevertheless, let's go back to how they actually tell that part of the story. So, how they tell the part of the story is pretty simple. They have, like, a text box, or they have a full screen of text, because for some reason, and I've never seen any other visual novel game do this, and there's a very good reason why, but they have 2 different systems you can use. You can use the ADV system, which has just a dialogue box with characters talking, or you can have the novel system, which has the characters talking as well, but it also has flavor text every few lines. It seems quite bizarre to split these 2 up into 2 different things, especially if you plan on playing the ADV section to skip the flavor text. Because eventually the game is just going to decide that you need to be in the novel mode anyway, and it's going to automatically swap you to the novel mode in order to get a bunch of flavor text through. And this seems a bit schizophrenic. I'm not entirely sure why they've done this. It feels distracting, especially when it forces you to swap between the 2 different modes. And they could have easily just made it so that the text that shows up only in the novel side of things could have appeared in a version of the dialogue box that only shows up as, like, you know, just a one-person talking thing. It's weird. I'm not entirely sure why they've done it this way, and it just distracts me. It isn't helped out by a few other things that they've got going on. So, I only played through 1 route. There's like 6, so I didn't play through that much of the game, but I was still surprised that I found over half a dozen typos just by casually reading. Half a dozen. I'm not even kidding. It's weird. There's ones where punctuation marks are missing, there's ones where words are spelled wrong, and then there's a couple where the text in the subtitle doesn't match what they actually physically say in the voice acting. I'm not entirely sure what the deal is with this. I'm really not. It can't have they have just gone back and updated the subtitle later. It's a little bit weird, and I'm talking like it's like a fully changed line. It means the same thing, but the words are in different positions, and it's like, are you sure you couldn't have just gone back and updated the subtitle? They do get away with this in one positive way, though, and I'll get to why that is shortly, but still, it's a bit weird to just hear him say one line and then on screen is just another completely different line for no discernible reason. I can't tell you why. It's a simple error. It should have been picked up, and it's not. I mean, sure, I can understand why they might have gone off script to feel a little bit more natural, and again, they do this later to better effect. But at the same time, couldn't you have gone back and edited the text? It's easy. It's a 30-second change at most, but whatever.
Let's open these up.
So, one of the major things they actually added in this port is the voice acting. And the voice acting in this game is overall a mixed bag for me personally. I actually really like Junpei. Most people don't like his voice acting in this game. As far as I remember from back when the game first came out, I'm not going to claim to remember precise things because it's been a few years, but I do remember his voice being a bit of a downturn, and frankly, I think he's the best one of the bunch, and it's because he's willing to go ever so slightly off script in order to add a little bit of extra character to him. He's more of a bumbling fool than anything, but it works. It makes him a bit of a lovable scamp, and I do appreciate some of the things that he does. As for the rest of the cast, it can be a bit weird. June is just flat out average, as in, like, I have no ups or downs about her, and that's basically my main down point. She doesn't stand out in any way. She just sounds like someone they picked up off the... Well, she doesn't sound like someone they picked up off the street, but it just sounds like the sort of random person you'd run into on the street, right? There's nothing really special about her voice. Ow. There's nothing really special about her voice, but it's just, yeah, that is kind of her character in the grand scheme of things, but I mean, yeah, it's just a little bit weird. Seven, Snake, and Santa all have voices that fit their characters alright. I got no problem with the three of them. They are actually pretty good picks. Ace is odd. I don't know what it is about Ace's voice that sticks out to me, but his voice sounds like halfway between his actual character that they reveal throughout the course of the plot and a mad scientist in the vein of Doc from Back to the Future. I'm not entirely sure why. Is it an in-between between them? It sounds like he's trying to physically suppress it sometimes. It's a little bit weird, especially considering who he turns out to be, but it's just bizarre that his voice is just like something completely off kilter from what I would have expected from the character. Clover is in this and she's annoying as fuck. I'm just gonna say that right from the out. Even when she's talking normally, something tells me that she's just trying too hard, and as a result, it sounds like she's not trying hard enough, and it just tickles that funny bone in my head that makes me want to punch the voice actor in the face. I apologize. I know you might have been doing the best you could with what you had, but I gotta say, the voice acting just does not work for me. It really doesn't. Then you've got Lotus. Lotus is the person I'm leaving it for last because I think she put in absolutely no effort to the role whatsoever. Every single line, every last damn line that comes out of her mouth sounds like a bloody monotone monologue. It's unbelievable. She has no inflection in her voice whatsoever. Even when it gets to the point where she's supposed to physically assault another one of the main characters because they call her an old hag, her voice barely changes. It's like the voice actor wanted nothing to do with the character whatsoever, but was just forced into it contractually or something, because I really do not like the voice at all. I think it had absolutely no effort put into it whatsoever. Bizarre. Really bizarre to me. I'm not entirely sure why that's a thing.
How could I do that? I wrote it down.
None of this is helped out by the fact that the game has a little bit of a problem with its auto timing. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, when you press the square button, it automatically goes through, like, the lines one by one. Right? So it goes through and plays the voices one by one and gives you enough time to read the text before you go on. In 999, not only can you not configure this, they've got it configured wrong. So if you're listening to the voice acting will continue until the end of the line, and then after the end of the line, it'll take about a second under normal circumstances to go to the next line. However, if you have an even remotely longer what's the word I'm looking for? A remotely longer sentence, something like 2 or 3 lines on screen, the period that it takes to go to the next audio clip is like 4 seconds. It's honestly ridiculously long, and it's really distracting because it makes you think of like a bunch of really socially awkward people trying to have a conversation because they're all just standing there for like 2 to 3 seconds. Just imagine someone popping up every time they have a little gap in the dialogue saying, silence. every single time that they just like cut out like that for longer than they need to. It's really weird, and I don't know why they've done it this way. And as I said before, you can't configure it so that it actually goes on to the next line at the very end of the line you just heard. So I'm not entirely sure what the deal is there. You could also go to the effort of turning the voice acting all the way down, but there's nothing to replace it, which is kind of disappointing, because back on the original DS version of 999, everyone had these little bleeps going on every time their text scrolled across the screen, which gave everyone just like that little bit of a character voice, and I like it when games do that. It gives games just that little bit extra personality, where they might not be able to afford like actual voice actors. At least it might give you an idea of what they might sound like in real life. This game doesn't do that, obviously, because it has the voice actors, until you get into the puzzle segments where they've got those bleepy voices. It would have been a nice touch to be able to turn the voice acting all the way down and just hear those bleeps all throughout the game, but I guess they just didn't think that far ahead, because honestly, the entire thing feels a little bit rushed. As I said before, there's typos everywhere, and there's a couple of other things, like there's a really bare bones menu system going on. It doesn't even resemble, like, the original thing, which had this cool little sort of like shipwrecked ship menu background thing going on in the main menu, which I really liked. But in this one, it's just this generic undersea, like, water shining through the surface, sunlight shining through the surface, I should say, sort of like blank background going on. Like, it's not even like the gigantic or whatever sailing off into the distance or anything like that that would at least be visually interesting. It's just this weird background that's just there. I'm not entirely sure what convinced him to go down that route, but it honestly feels just that tiny bit rushed. With that said, why does Junpei vape? Gotta give you a second to realize the context for this one. So, when you are playing through and Junpei is thinking something to himself, but only on certain times, the text will say he's thinking something to himself, but then, like, the little hazy blue smoke that appears around the outside of the picture won't actually appear, but then when he's actually talking to himself and there's voice acting, you'll get this hazy blue smoke just around the edges of the thing, and it's just there. It reminds me of how in Dark Souls 2, they had this thing where it was like a bloody screen surreal at the beginning of the first boss, and it was just there for no discernible reason. And they do it with this because it honestly does look like he vapes blue smoke, and I'm not entirely sure why. They've got this clear, like, echoey effect going on to try and symbolize that he's thinking this inside his own mind. So why did they have to add this blue haze everywhere that makes me think he's a stoner? I'm not going to claim no, but it's there and it's a thing. Thankfully, the actual puzzles didn't run into this sort of problem. For the most part, you can just go through them. The controls are a little bit weird, though. They're okay in the grand scheme of things. They do the job, but the game was obviously designed around the idea of being able to, like, tap things very accurately with a DS stylus. So when you're going at it with either your own finger or the analog stick and the X button, you need to be actually kind of precise in order to get some of the smaller objects. Kind of annoying, honestly, but it's okay. You get used to it after a while. You usually don't have to, like, tap something more than twice to get an idea of where your finger needs to be in order to actually pick it up. There are some other button controls that you need to get used to, like in Virtue's Last Reward. Being able to, like, swap viewpoints with the L and the R button, and, you know, tapping with the screen to, you know, use it. Figuring out the combination of tapping the screen and using the buttons that works good for you is usually fine in this case. I didn't have that much of a problem with it. And they didn't change the puzzles at all, as far as I can tell, except for one, which we'll get into at the very end of this rant. But they made it so that they're pretty much all the same old puzzles. There's no red herrings, there's no, like, outright fake objects. Everything you pick up does have a use. And they don't feel like rooms with endless clutter. The screens are well designed, they are kept nice and clean. Anything that you really need to pay attention to will be on screen, so they don't just mess up the screen for the hell of it. And I usually, again, averaged around, well, not again, but I usually averaged around like 20 minutes to get through each puzzle, which is absolutely fine by me, because they are simple, but they are satisfying to solve, which I appreciate. So yeah, it's the same old puzzles more or less. There is one weird bug that I ran into a couple of times though, where there's this blue thing that's supposed to come up that has Junpei's face on it that flips around and turns into Seek a Way Out. But for some reason, sometimes Junpei's face wouldn't actually appear there, and it's just this weird blue rectangle going across the screen. And again, it just makes me think that the game was rushed a bit, because there seems to be a few things just kind of out of whack, like as I said before. The typos, and the fact that the auto timing is off, and the fact that there are just some weird bugs like that around. I'm not going to claim to know what the rest of the game is like. As I said, I only got up to the knife ending, but... well, I'm not going to say that it's completely unplayable. I'm just going to say that it feels like they rushed it, and it's kind of disappointing because of that. If they put a little bit more effort into, like, giving the sprites a little bit of a redraw, maybe making the controls a little bit better, fixing the auto timing, and maybe getting a couple of different voice actors in instead of the couple that they do have. Also, I did listen to the Japanese voice acting, and it's just average. I didn't really find anything in particular noteworthy or, you know, mockingly stupid or anything like that. It just sounded okay. I didn't really have a problem with the Japanese VA, although I'm kind of annoyed by the fact that you have to go through the, what's it called? I'm kind of annoyed by the fact that you have to go back into the main menu in order to actually swap the voice dubbing, but there are worse problems, I will admit. And I did look up the ending on YouTube to see how they handled the big final twist, and they did alright. I got nothing wrong with the way they did it. In fact, it kind of, probably shouldn't say this out loud for anyone who hasn't played 999 yet, but let me just say, it makes enough sense. It kind of hits you in the face with it a bit more about what exactly is going on and why, but at the same time, you know, that's kind of how it turns out anyway. It's okay. I'll say that the ending is preserved well enough for anyone who wants to actually go through and play it. And I got to appreciate how they changed the final puzzle, because the final puzzle in the DS version was just a grid of Sudoku, and that actually kind of pissed me off. I was hoping for something a little bit more unique and interesting, which they actually did for the Nonary games, which I appreciate, I suppose. So yeah, that was just a quick rant on what I think of the port. As I said, I didn't play it all the way through. I only got to one ending and then looked up the true ending on YouTube. But, I mean, it feels a little bit rushed and unfinished, but at the same time, it doesn't really feel like the worst way to play the game. So, I'll at least say... excuse me. I will at least say that the remaster is good enough that it's worth playing if you haven't played 999 before. But there's nothing particularly new here for you if you have played the game before, so if you have played it before, you can ignore it. But if you haven't played it before and you're wondering, like, if you're wondering whether or not it's worth your time, it absolutely is. Just because I've spent the last 20 minutes ragging on the just overall rushedness of the port, it is still a really engaging story. The characters are still fun, even though the voice acting was a little bit misguided in places. And just the thrills, chills, and kills, as one particular bear would say, are still great. So I would wholeheartedly recommend you go and pick up the game somehow, and it looks like the Nonary games is going to be the easiest way to do it. And it has been on sale on both Vita and PC, and PS4 I assume as well, for like $5. Seriously, on Steam, very recently you were able to get the entire trilogy for $12, which... an absolute steal. Like, an absolute steal. If that sort of deal comes up again, you should immediately buy everything related to the series. So, yeah, there you go. I'm gonna leave the footage that I'm recording going for as long as I feel necessary. I might also play through the puzzle that I have going here, but yeah, there you go. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.